Why do we let a stranger's comment online ruin our entire day, yet pretend we're strong for keeping silent at work when our boss disrespects us? Maybe our idea of strength has been upside down. Modern society tells you to express every feeling or risk being fake. But what if the truth is the opposite, that reacting to everything makes you weaker, easier to manipulate, and more exhausted than ever? We live in an age where validation is currency, likes, replies, recognition. But here's the controversy. The moment you stop chasing understanding is the moment you finally get free. Are you ready to face that? Welcome to StoicCraft, a place where ancient Stoic wisdom meets today's chaotic world. Here, we don't chase quick fixes or hollow mantras. We train the mind to stay unshaken, to guard our peace, and to live with strength that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Have you ever noticed how one careless comment can ruin your entire mood? How a single unread message or lack of reply can send your mind spiraling into panic? Or how one disapproving glance from a stranger can live in your head rent-free for the whole day? These reactions don't mean you're weak or broken. They simply mean you've never been trained. The modern world keeps bombarding us with rejection, criticism, judgment, and misunderstanding. It's not going to stop. But here's the truth. You don't have to stop the waves. You only need to learn how to stand steady while they crash. That's the promise of Stoicism. Not an outdated philosophy locked in dusty books, but a training system for the mind. It teaches you how to stop living on emotional autopilot and start taking back control. Stoicism doesn't promise that you'll never feel upset, angry, or misunderstood. What it does promise is the strength to master the storm within, so that no storm outside can shake you. And let's be clear, this isn't about repeating empty mantras like, "Just be positive." Life doesn't work that way, and you already know it. What you'll hear instead are practical tools, 7 principles that will train you to stop reacting impulsively, stop chasing external validation, and stop depending on someone else's approval to feel alive. This is not self-help fluff. This is training. Training to shed the fragile version of yourself and grow into a fortress that cannot be breached. Number 1. Emotional discipline. Being disturbed is easy. Anyone can be thrown off by a rude email, a cold partner, or a careless colleague. But being unbothered is a skill, and like every skill, it has to be trained. Nobody is born immune to criticism or rejection. Even the strongest people feel the sting. The difference is that those who practice Stoicism understand something most of us forget. Emotions don't control us by default. We give them that control. The problem isn't that we feel hurt, it's how far we allow that hurt to drag us. If you want to be steady, the training starts not with controlling the world, but with controlling your own mind. Don't wish for life to be easier or for people to be softer. Instead, build yourself strong enough that even when the world bristles, you remain unshaken, not numb, not detached, but calm, deliberate, and unwilling to be dragged into battles that don't matter. That's the essence of emotional discipline. You control the gate between stimulus and response, and that tiny space, that pause where you decide, is where your power lives. The truth is, most of our pain doesn't come from what people do. It comes from the meaning we assign to their actions. Someone doesn't text back and suddenly you feel abandoned. Someone doesn't compliment you and you feel invisible. A coworker interrupts you and you feel disrespected. But none of those events carried meaning until you decided they did. So ask yourself who's really causing your pain, them or you. Emotional discipline is not about silencing yourself. It's about practicing internal judgment before you act. It doesn't prove that you don't feel. It proves that you've grown enough not to let every feeling become action. Pain is inevitable, but turning pain into an impulsive reaction, that's a choice. And repeated choices over time become habits or chains. Seneca put it best. Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. If you need to raise your voice just to feel heard, if you need to snap back just to feel respected, then you're still depending on others to give you life. The person who has mastered their emotions doesn't need to win every argument, doesn't need to correct every misunderstanding, and doesn't need to retaliate against every insult. Why? Because they've become highly selective about what deserves their energy. We think anger makes us strong. It doesn't. It only proves that someone else was able to pull your strings. Every time you lose your temper, you're handing them the keys to your life. That's why emotional discipline isn't about being calm all the time. It's about reclaiming your agency when chaos erupts. When others raise their voices, you keep yours low. When others provoke, you stay still. When others misunderstand you, you don't waste energy trying to convince everyone. Not because you don't care, but because you've chosen what's actually worth caring about. Take the example of David. A lawyer, sharp, rational, but easily rattled. Every time a colleague dismissed his opinion, his mind spiraled. They don't respect me. They're playing politics. By the time he went home, he was drained. Then one day, in a routine hearing, a younger colleague accused him of breaking protocol. Normally, he'd have exploded. But this time he didn't. He kept his tone calm, continued presenting his case, and ignored the bait. Later, when someone asked why, he simply said, "I didn't want to waste energy on something that wouldn't change anything." That was his turning point, the moment he realized calm isn't giving up, it's rising above. From then on, he began every morning by writing just one line. Choose what's worth reacting to. That single practice transformed him more than any 3-hour meditation session ever could. This is where your training starts too, not with pretending you don't care, but with observing yourself. Ask, what throws me off balance? Who still has the power to make me feel small? And why have I given them that power? Piece by piece, you reclaim it through emotional discipline. And don't mistake calm for weakness. Stoicism doesn't teach you to ignore injustice. It teaches you to face it without blind rage, to respond with principle, not pride, to act from your values, not from impulse. That's real strength. And it's also the hardest training of all. To remain in control of yourself when the entire world is trying to pull you out of yourself. When you learn emotional discipline, something extraordinary happens. You become the still point in a spinning world. Others notice it even if you never say a word. Your presence changes the atmosphere, not because you've silenced yourself permanently, but because you've mastered the choice of when to speak and when to stay still. That's why the next lesson is so crucial. Silence is not weakness. Silence is power. Number 2. Silence is strength. Silence is not passive. It's not retreat. It's deliberate. It's a calm nod to yourself that says, I refuse to give the outside world permission to dictate my inner state. The fascinating thing about silence is this. The moment you stop rushing to defend yourself, you start to see more clearly. People reveal their true colors in the space your silence creates. Someone who throws insults at you isn't really looking to understand. They're looking for your reaction. They want proof that they can pull you down to their level, where emotion takes control and reason disappears. But silence in that moment is not weakness. It's refusing to step into the mud pit, because no one walks out of a mud fight clean. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Strength isn't winning every debate, every online argument, or every family fight. True strength is the ability to say to yourself, this is not my battle. Think about how often we react just for the sake of reacting, not because it mattered, but because being misunderstood felt unbearable, or because being disrespected triggered something deep inside. Each time we react unnecessarily, we trade away our calm, a resource far more precious than money or recognition. Take Ethan's story. He worked at a tech firm, talented, smart, but constantly rattled by sarcasm and criticism from his domineering boss. At first, he fought back. He used logic to corner his manager in meetings, fired off arguments to prove his worth. But what did that get him? No support, no relief, just exhaustion and isolation. Every battle he won only cost him peace. Then one day Ethan chose differently. In another tense meeting, the manager made a cutting remark. Instead of sparring back, Ethan looked up, gave a calm nod, and kept taking notes. The meeting ended without fireworks. Nobody lost face, but something had shifted. Later that day, the same boss who often belittled him sent a short email. I appreciate your professionalism. Respect didn't come from louder words. It came from refusing to be ruled by impulse. That's the paradox of silence. It often speaks louder than anger ever could. We live in a culture that celebrates noise. People talk more than they think. Social media rewards outrage. Offices run on gossip and drama. In such a world, silence becomes a statement. It says, I'm not here to play emotional games. I'm here to live with purpose. When you stop reacting, you don't become passive. You start responding with clarity. A simple practice. Choose one day a week where you decide, I will only respond to what helps me grow. The rest I will let pass like the wind. At first, it feels difficult. You'll itch to reply, to explain, to defend. But the more you resist the urge, the lighter you feel. Because some battles exist only in other people's minds, you don't need to enter them. The truth is, this world is filled with people who are easily shaken by words. That's why those who remain calm stand out. If you want to be one of them, start today. Stay still in the storm. No yelling, no comebacks, just a deep knowing. If it doesn't belong to me, it's not worth my peace. Practice it, repeat it, make it reflex. And if this resonates with you, if you see yourself in these examples, don't just nod and move on. Start training. Because silence used deliberately is not emptiness. It's power. Number 3, heal. So you no longer react. No one can truly wound you unless there's already an unhealed wound inside you. What others say is just sound. What turns their words into a blade is the memory it strikes within you. That's why most of our reactions don't come from the present. They come from the past. We mistake triggers for truth. Someone leaves your message unread, and you spiral into anxiety. But is it really about that unread message? Or is it the shadow of an old abandonment you've never faced? Someone interrupts you mid-sentence and you feel disrespected. But is it really about this conversation? Or about years of being overlooked when you were younger? Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. And because we don't face it, it controls us. Healing is about bringing that shadow into the light. It's not an emotional roller coaster. It's not about forced forgiveness or pretending the past never happened. Healing is intellectual discipline. It's the courage to examine your inner machinery, to ask why this moment hurts so much, and to loosen the grip it has over you. Stoicism never said you should eliminate emotions. It doesn't want you to become a stone. It wants you to feel your emotions rise and yet not be swept away by them. Like an old swordsman who has fought too many battles to draw his blade at every provocation, you learn to watch calmly because you already know where blind reactions lead. You're not free if your mind reacts automatically like a machine. True freedom is the ability to pause, to see clearly, and to decide. That's why the journey of healing is inseparable from the journey of Stoicism. Not to punish your emotions, but to understand them. That's the real shift. Instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, you start to say, this is why I get angry. This is the wound I've never dealt with. Stoicism never demanded that we become stone. Marcus Aurelius felt sadness, anger, and loneliness, but what did he do with them? He didn't bury them or pretend they didn't exist. He wrote them down in his meditations, not to complain, but to cultivate clarity. What stands in the way becomes the way. That wasn't just a clever line, it was a practical blueprint. You don't avoid what triggers you. You use it as training. Every single time you feel yourself being provoked, you're given a choice. Fall into the old pattern of lashing out, or pause, breathe, observe. Instead of asking, who's wrong here? Ask, what old pain in me is this pointing to? Do that consistently, and over time, you begin rewriting the very programming that drives your reactions. Eliot's story shows us how this plays out in real life. He was quiet, thoughtful, and sensitive, qualities that should have been strengths in a creative agency. But in his workplace, high-pressure meetings made sensitivity look like weakness. One day his boss looked him in the eye and said, "You're too soft to survive in this industry." Outwardly, Eliot just nodded. Inwardly, his hands trembled, fury rising like a storm. How could one comment cut so deep? In the past, Eliot would have gone home and snapped at his partner, or buried himself in work to escape the feeling. But this time he did something different. Instead of distracting himself, he followed the thread. He sat in silence and asked, "Why does this feel so unbearable?" Slowly, the answer surfaced. As a child, whenever Eliot expressed emotion, his father would scold him. Real men don't get soft. Over time, Eliot learned to hide his feelings, to swallow them whole. That wound never healed, and every time someone touched that inner softness, it ripped open the scar again. The boss's comment wasn't about this meeting, It was about an unhealed story from decades earlier. Elliot realized something profound. The emotion wasn't wrong. The feeling itself was valid. But without understanding its roots, it drove him like a car with no brakes. From then on, every time he was criticized, instead of shrinking or exploding, he paused and asked, "Does this reaction belong to this moment, or is it an echo of an old wound?" That single question became his compass, and that's what healing really is, observing your inner world like a scientist watching a reaction. Instead of instantly rejecting it or surrendering to it, you sit with it, trace it, untangle it. That practice demands more discipline than any workout or diet. Because here you're not just reshaping your body, you're rebuilding your inner operating system. Do this enough, and one day you notice something miraculous. The same situations that used to cause rage, sleepless nights, or endless stress suddenly feel lighter. Not because the world got any calmer, it hasn't, but because you're no longer manipulated by every trigger. You don't react, not because you're numb, but because you finally understand. Non-reaction is the highest form of inner strength. So here's the question. Do you want to keep living the old way, endlessly responding to pain you never processed? Or do you want to become the author of your own responses? Real power isn't in shouting louder, forcing control, or proving people wrong. Real power is this: no one can pull me out of my peace unless I let them. And to protect that peace, there's one resource you must guard more than anything else: your energy. Because no matter how much healing you've done, if you keep pouring energy into things that don't matter, you're still bleeding out without realizing it. Energy isn't just a metaphor, it's your most vital asset. Which brings us to the next lesson. Number 4, your energy is your asset. You don't need chaos or drama to feel drained. All it takes is 3 unresolved conversations looping in your head, 2 judgments you still feel the need to respond to, and 1 quiet frustration you've never spoken about. The heaviest exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from not knowing when to stop. It comes from not setting mental boundaries against things that don't deserve your energy. Most people think emotional mastery begins with controlling their feelings, but Stoicism begins with something quieter: controlling where your energy flows. Every time you tell yourself, "I can't let this slide," or "I need to prove my point," or "I can't stand their attitude," it isn't really emotion speaking, it's energy leaking. And here's the irony. We're meticulous about protecting our money, careful about our reputations, even obsessive about our physical safety. But when it comes to our inner energy, we spend it recklessly, scattering it across gossip, arguments, toxic comments, and people who were never worth our attention. Seneca didn't use the modern word energy, but he might as well have. He wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." Spread yourself across too many fragments, and you'll never have the focus to do what truly matters. And to the Stoics, nothing was more valuable than peace of mind. Picture it this way: each day you wake up with a limited budget, not of money, but of mental energy. If you spend it on petty arguments, on defending yourself against every jab, on explaining yourself to people who don't care, you'll reach the end of the day bankrupt, with nothing left for what actually builds your life. Stillness doesn't come from hours of meditation. It comes from energy discipline. Richard learned this the hard way. He wasn't running around physically, but mentally he was everywhere at once in work, in relationships, on social media, replaying arguments with his ex, fearing irrelevance. To everyone else, his life looked fine. But inside, he was exhausted, tense, unable to rest. Eventually, chronic insomnia landed him in the hospital. Doctors found nothing physically wrong. But deep down, Richard knew he was being drained by invisible leaks. So one night, desperate, he wrote 2 lists. What nourishes me and what drains me? He discovered that 80% of his fatigue came from just 20% of the things he silently tolerated every day. That realization changed everything. Richard's story didn't end with a dramatic outburst or a grand collapse. There were no fireworks, no visible explosions, just the slow erosion of focus. Constant distractions stole his ability to concentrate, drained his creativity, and dulled his capacity to love. That was the real cost, not burnout in a single day, but a steady leak of his life force. So he began closing doors, one by one. No more scrolling through meaningless messages after midnight. No more letting toxic voices enter his feed. No more endless conversations that went nowhere. Surprisingly, this didn't make him cold or distant. Quite the opposite. He became more alive, more connected to himself than he had ever been. By protecting his energy, he discovered his own presence. Now ask yourself, who is using your energy without permission? How many of your daily actions are driven by fear of disappointing others rather than genuine necessity? How often do you sacrifice your peace just to preserve an image you don't even believe in anymore? We often imagine strength as fighting harder, pushing further, or resisting longer. But Stoicism offers another truth. You don't have to fight every wave. You just need to stop swimming into them. What disturbs you isn't the world itself. It's your inability to discern what truly belongs to you and what doesn't. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us and some are not." And strangely, it's rarely the burdens that are truly ours that exhaust us. It's the ones we borrow other people's opinions, their judgments, their false assumptions about us. Carrying those weights is like trying to walk with someone else's backpack strapped to your chest. It was never yours to begin with. So when you feel the urge to fire back, to defend yourself, to set the record straight, pause and ask, is this worth my energy? Will this help me grow in wisdom and character or in peace? If not, let it pass. Let the words float by like clouds drifting across the sky. You don't chase every cloud, you watch it move on. The truth is, not everything deserves access to your mind. Your mind is sacred ground. You wouldn't allow strangers to walk into your home and rearrange your furniture. Why then let a careless comment rearrange the peace inside your head? That's the paradox. People treat their physical space with more care than their mental space, when the latter is infinitely more valuable. If you still find yourself reacting immediately to every slight, every irritation, there's a simple practice that could change your life. Pause just 3 seconds before responding. 3 seconds may sound trivial, but in those moments you are training the very muscle the Stoics spent lifetimes mastering. You're teaching yourself that not every emotion deserves an action, and not every sting deserves retaliation. Those 3 seconds are where strength begins. By now, you've already made it halfway through this journey. And if you're still here, it's because you're ready to stop letting trivial things control you. You're ready to build a mind that can Remain still even when the world spins. So here's a challenge. Share in the comments what you're still giving your energy to, even though deep down you know it isn't worth it. Sometimes naming the thing out loud is the first step toward reclaiming your freedom. Because here's the next step. Freedom doesn't mean being understood by everyone. It means not needing to be number 5. You don't need to be understood. This lesson isn't about apathy. It's about mastery. People who lack inner strength are always compelled to explain, to justify, to persuade. They cling to validation as if their worth will vanish the moment it goes unseen. But if you truly want to stand solid like rock in the storm, you must first release the need to be understood, not because the world is cruel, but because the world is busy. Everyone is trapped in their own maze of memory, bias, expectation, and pain. You may speak with perfect clarity, but what they hear is filtered through their own history. And then you're left wondering why you were misread, misjudged, mislabeled. The truth is, you can't control how someone interprets you. And refusing to accept this is the very place where your peace begins to unravel. Stoicism doesn't tell you to suffer in silence. It tells you to sort things out, what belongs within your control and what doesn't. Someone else's misunderstanding? Not yours. Your words, your choices, your values. That's where your energy belongs. That's where your strength is forged. Malcolm's story illustrates this perfectly. He was a strategic advisor for international NGOs, a man who built his career on clarity and patience. For nearly a decade, he lived by one principle: clarity earns respect. But during a high-stakes collaboration, Malcolm pointed out a serious ethical flaw in the plan. Instead of listening, his colleagues accused him of being difficult, too idealistic, even naive. For the first time, Malcolm didn't defend himself. He didn't argue, justify, or plead. He simply withdrew from the project, moved cities, and started his own independent consulting practice. When asked why, he said, "I don't need to be understood anymore. I only need to stay true to myself." It wasn't easy, but for the first time in his life, Malcolm felt free. He no longer had to bargain away his truth to earn someone else's approval. And that's the lesson. Who you are isn't decided by other people's opinions. It's built brick by brick by your own choices. If you need rest and someone calls it laziness, rest anyway. If you need to cut ties and someone calls it betrayal, cut anyway. Because their labels can't alter the truth that you're living. In alignment with your values and your limits, the real test is this. Are you strong enough not to need agreement? Can you stay quiet when every cell in your body wants to explain? Can you walk away without looking back for validation? That's strength. Not the absence of emotion, but the reclaiming of your mind from the grip of others. And for that, you need one tool above all, the pause. When you're misjudged, misunderstood, or misquoted, don't react right away. Create space. Not to suppress anger, but to ask honestly, will reacting change anything, or is it just my ego scrambling to regain control? If it's only the ego, stay quiet. Stay steady. Let your actions, not your reactions, tell your story. And don't fall for the excuse. If I don't explain, they'll keep misunderstanding me. Yes, they will. People will misread you, twist your words, and paint you in colors that don't belong to you. But the world will not stop turning because of their misperceptions, and your life cannot be placed on hold waiting for them to finally get it. You cannot stake your honor on someone else's clarity. They don't walk in your shoes. They don't carry the cost of your decisions. You do every single day. The moment you master calm in the face of misunderstanding, something remarkable happens. You realize most emotions don't actually require a reaction. They arrive like uninvited guests, knock loudly for a while, but if you don't answer the door, they eventually leave. That's the freedom Stoicism points toward. Freedom doesn't mean emotions disappear. It means they no longer drag you away with them. Lesson 6. Feeling doesn't mean you must react. There's something deeply ironic about being human. We've built skyscrapers that scrape the heavens. We've split atoms, traveled across continents in hours, and connected the globe through invisible signals. Yet all it takes is one sarcastic remark, one disapproving glance, or one unanswered text to reduce us to chaos. We crumble not from earthquakes, but from eyebrows raised at the wrong time. If you want true strength, the kind the Stoics spoke of, you must understand this. Emotions are not commands, they are signals. Clouds passing overhead, flames flaring up and dying down, waves hitting the shore. You are not obligated to obey them. If you steer your life by every emotional gust of wind, you'll forever drift, never anchor. Our instinct, of course, is to react, to defend, to lash out, to protect. Our pride. But Stoic philosophy calls us to something harder and infinitely more liberating. Pause. Notice the feeling, but don't follow it blindly. Ask yourself, why does a stranger's insult ignite your fury, but your boss's criticism in public makes you bite your tongue? Deep down, you already know you can control your reactions. You simply choose when to exercise it. But what if restraint itself became your default? What if you trained yourself to see non-reaction not as weakness, but as proof of power? Imagine the freedom in that, no one able to jerk your strings with a careless word. That is sovereignty. Consider Andrew, a 40-year-old manager at a software company. In a meeting, a colleague publicly called him indecisive and slow. Heat surged through him. His whole body urged him to slam the table, to fire back, and once upon a time he would have. Those outbursts had already cost him dearly his marriage, his friendships, his peace. But through therapy, reflection, and mornings spent reading meditations, Andrew had learned the truth. Anger destroys more than it ever saved. So he breathed. He looked his colleague in the eye and said calmly, "I hear you. Let's talk one-on-one." That was it. No explosion, no humiliation. Some thought he looked weak, but Andrew knew better. He had defended himself without losing himself. That is power. If you're quick to anger or easily rattled, here's the question. Does your reaction serve the values you claim to live by, or is it just a reflex of an untrained mind? Ecclesiastes warns us, do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. Anger doesn't make you strong. It makes you predictable, easy to control. So here's your training. The next time irritation spikes, say nothing. Just notice. Let the emotion knock, but don't let it in. Like a storm cloud, it will pass. Do this often enough, and you'll discover something life-changing. You're no longer living in reaction. But in deliberate choice, people confuse reacting with honesty. They say, I'm just being real. But honesty doesn't require servitude to impulse. A strong man isn't the one who roars the loudest. It's the one who knows when to stay silent. That silence isn't avoidance. It's refined action. It's saying, my inner world is mine. You don't get to own it. And that calm, unshaken presence isn't just for show. It's preparation for the next step. Because clarity without action is empty. The Stoics never stopped at knowing the path. They walked it. Which is why the final principle is this. Strength only becomes real when it's lived out in the arena of life. Lesson 7. Value lies in action. If you still require the world to validate that you're doing the right thing, you're not strong enough yet. Not because you're wrong, but because you've tied your worth to the opinions of others. To be unbothered, you must cut that cord. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be indifferent. It asks you to be anchored. So anchored that no applause can inflate you and no criticism can deflate you. Your worth stops being something others give or take away. It becomes something grounded in what you do. Value isn't in the titles you hold or the compliments you collect. It's in the actions that remain when the words, excuses, and performances are stripped away. Look at what you did yesterday when no one was watching. That more than anything you post online or say in public is who you are. And here lies the modern tragedy. We live in an age drowning in smoke. People talk endlessly about courage but fall silent when truth requires their voice. They praise integrity but sell it the moment convenience offers a bargain. They are not shaken because the world is too loud. They are shaken because within they are not yet clear. To live as the Stoics lived is to strip away that noise and stand in the clarity of action. Not performance, not reaction, action. Something remarkable happens when you finally place your value in your actions rather than in the noise around you. The craving for reactions disappears. You no longer beg for explanations, chase after being understood, or hunger for someone to pat you on the back and say you're okay. This shift doesn't come from becoming numb. It comes from clarity. When your daily actions align with what you believe is right, the chaos of the world fades into background static. What once shook you now barely stirs you. A person who no longer wrestles against their own conscience has no reason to be shaken by the opinions of strangers. Action, when rooted in integrity, becomes the mind's most graceful shield. There's a story that illustrates this truth. A man named Thomas, an independent game developer, worked in obscurity for 3 long years. He had no audience, no investors cheering him on, no fans waiting for updates. Just a small, cramped room and a vision he couldn't shake. Day after day he wrote code, sketched artwork, and crafted dialogue. Some mocked him for wasting his time. Others advised him to give up and get realistic. But Thomas would only smile and reply, I'm building a world I believe is worth living in. When he finally released the game, the world barely noticed. No launch parties, no viral success, no instant recognition. And yet he didn't break. He didn't spiral into despair. Why? Because he wasn't doing it for applause. He was doing it because it needed to be done. 2 years later, by chance, a well-known influencer mentioned his game. Overnight, it exploded. But by then, Thomas had already moved on. building something new in silence. His validation came not from trending, hashtags or headlines, but from knowing he lived aligned with his purpose. Success was just a byproduct. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever delayed doing what you knew was right simply because nobody was watching, nobody was clapping, nobody was offering encouragement? Have you ever tied your worth to someone else's acknowledgement and felt smaller when it never came? If so, it's time to return to your foundation, to act not for their eyes, but for your own integrity. Keep a promise nobody asked you to keep. Be kind when there's no one to witness it. Follow through on a project without posting progress for validation. If you can do that, if you can act for truth rather than applause, then no one will ever again have the power to make you doubt yourself. You'll become your own validation, and that is unshakable. When you live this way, silence from others becomes fuel. Their judgments turn weightless. The noise of the outside world becomes scenery rather than shackles. And you become the one who walks forward, not for the stage, not for the audience, but for the path itself. Every small, steady step in the right direction becomes enough. Even without applause, you'll never again be swept away. This brings you to the final stop of today's journey, a journey not outward into the world, but inward, back to yourself. Together we've walked through 7 principles of inner training. From emotional discipline, the art of choosing what deserves your response, to silence as strength, refusing to play games you can't win. From healing the old wounds that keep you reactive, to guarding your energy as if it were your most valuable currency. We've seen why being misunderstood isn't a wound you must always heal, but sometimes a weight you must lay down. We've seen that feelings aren't commands, that calm restraint is not weakness, but refined power. And we've seen that value lies not in talk or validation, but in the actions you repeat day after day. But maybe the most important insight isn't in counting lessons. It's in what you're feeling right now. Perhaps a sense of relief that you're not alone in being sensitive, not strange for being easily shaken. Or perhaps a sharper clarity that you now see the gap between what you feel and how you choose to act. And you realize you don't have to dive into every pointless battle. The world outside will never stop being noisy, judgmental, unpredictable. But you can grow stronger, steadier, warmer like steel, forged not to grow cold, but to endure the storms without losing its fire. So if this video made you pause, reflect, and see yourself even a little differently, don't let that pass you by. Like this video as a commitment to yourself. And if you want to keep building inner strength, not to please others, but to live more fully, more truthfully, and more unshakably, subscribe to StoicCraft. There's so much more ahead, because the storms will always come. But with practice, with presence, with discipline, you will not be swept away. You will be the calm in the storm. If this message resonated with you, drop a comment. I choose discipline over reaction. And if you want to keep building your inner fortress, explore our playlist on Stoic training, your next step toward mastering calm in a noisy world.